Hello, my name is Heather Indu Arena, and today I'm going to be introducing you to the topic of the psychology of Ayurveda. So if you haven't watched my previous video on an introduction to Ayurveda, you may want to watch that first. Otherwise, you can just dive right in right here and get introduced to the psychology of Ayurveda. So we'll begin our presentation right now. So as I said, my name is Heather Indu Arena, and my website is Healing Elements for You. And this is an introduction to the psychology of Ayurveda. So just to review, Ayurveda is defined as the knowledge or the science of life. So the study of Ayurveda introduces us to what life is and how to live life in a balanced way. So for today's presentation, we're going to do a quick review of the doshas. As I said, if you haven't watched my other video on an introduction to Ayurveda, you may want to watch that first. It goes into much more detail about the doshas. We'll also look at how the different doshas show up on us physically. So how can you look at a person and perhaps tell which dosha is primary in that person? We're also going to explore the psychological aspects of a human being when a specific dosha is primary for them. So if someone is primarily Kapha, what is going to be the best way to interact with them from a psychological perspective? It gives us a lot of different insights into understanding why people act the way they do and how they interact, and even best how we can interact with them with the best amount of communication, which is great in our personal relationships as well as for our work relationships and our social relationships. And finally, we'll have a little review on how to maintain balance of the different doshas. So as a review, the different doshas are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And Vata dosha is made up of ether and of air, and it governs movement. Now, if you remember, this ether and this air isn't just air and ether is also described as space, but it's the qualities that come along with ether and air. So quick movement, as well as cool, as well as crackly, things like that are the different qualities of Vata. Pitta is made up primarily of fire and of water, and Pitta governs absorption, digestion, and assimilation. And we can think of some qualities of Pitta as being hot because it's fire and sharp. Kapha is made up primarily of water and of earth, and it governs structure, cohesion, and lubrication. And some of the qualities of Kapha are slower, cooler. So we're going to start to look at the human body and the human psychology from the perspective of the three different doshas. So we'll begin with Vata. So if we remember, Vata is ether and air. So the appearance of a Vata person is the physical body is going to typically be the smallest out of the three doshas. So if we look at a Vata body, they're typically thin, their joints are smaller, and their physical body is smaller, and their hair is typically thin as well. The Vata typically will also have cold hands and cold feet because we've got this ether and air quality of being cold. The skin oftentimes will be more dry and cracked. The complexion of a Vata is typically darker. Specifically, their hair and their eyes are also darker. And again, the body is going to be lighter. The body is going to most likely be more flexible. The muscles and the joints are going to be more flexible. Vatas typically are fast moving. They're fast talkers. They're fast walkers. Their eyes shift around a lot more because, again, Vata governs movement. And typically the teeth will be larger and their nose will have some bends to it. If you consider, like, again, that movement of Vata, it's going to show up in their facial features as well. So if we kind of take into the appearance of a person, you'll be able to look around you and get an idea of family and friends. Okay, who has a Vata appearance going on? Remember that you can have more than one primary dosha. So you could be Vata Pitta, Pitta Vata, you could be Vata Pitta Kapha, you could be all three. So just keep in mind that someone may have a more Vata body type, but they may have a more Kapha personality type. So when Vata energy in the body and in the psychology is balanced, the person will have healthy digestion, they'll be sleeping well, their immunity is going to be strong. However, when it's out of balance, they're going to have abnormal bowel movements, their health is going to be much more delicate, they're going to have an inconsistent appetite, their digestion is going to be poor, they're not going to be able to absorb the nutrients they need as well, and they're going to burn out very quickly. So the Vatas burn out quickly, very fast when they're out of balance. Their energy is going to drop quickly. So let's look at the psychological functions of a healthy and balanced Vata. So from a perspective of their skin, their complexion is going to be much clearer. And their mental activity is going to be controlled and precise, not spastic and moving around and shifting from thing to thing. They're going to be incredibly creative. Vata is the most creative out of the three doshas, and it's going to show up in how they express themselves in the world. They're going to have a desire to lead a very active life. So activity is going to be very important, but they'll have the energy to lead that active life. They have the psychological aspects of enthusiasm and joy in life. Consider your optimists oftentimes are Vata. They have a lot of inspiration come in and they like to inspire others. And they're very mentally alert. So they're going to be very attentive to what's happening around them. So that's our Vata. When Vata is out of balance from a psychological perspective, the Vata may just begin talking and talking and talking and talking and keep talking, and it seems like it's going nowhere. It's again, that movement is happening. They'll psychologically move towards worry, anxiety, and mental agitation, fear and nervousness. They're more prone to feel confusion and distraction. And that creativity, that inspiration is going to be more disturbed when the Vata is out of balance. And they'll get overly excited way too easily. So in balance, again, our Vata are so creative and they're so enthusiastic and they're so joyful in life. But out of balance, they're going to move to anxiety and fear and confusion. And that creative aspect won't be able to come through clearly. From a physical perspective, when Vata is out of balance, there can be a lot of different things that show up. So they can have different pains and aches in the body, cramps. Their bone structure may begin to atrophy, bloating, gas, colic. Their nails become brittle. Oftentimes, Vata will move to constipation when it's out of balance. They'll have joint issues. Their skin, their lips, their feet, their hands become cracked. They'll start to crave hot things because they want to warm themselves up. They might have fatigue for no reason whatsoever. They'll dehydrate much more easily. And they'll feel maybe perhaps giddy or dizzy. Their memory is going to be more impaired. They may start hiccuping if that Vata gets increased. They'll have a much bigger intolerance to cold. And their sleep is going to be lighter or interrupted. They're going to be thirstier, and oftentimes they'll start to lose weight when their Vata is out of balance. So we've got physical as well as psychological things that will show up for a person when they're out of balance. And the psychological affects the physical, and the physical affects the psychological, which is so important to understand for all of our doshas. So when the Vata becomes imbalanced, because perhaps the person is eating vata aggravating foods. And again, you can look into my introduction to Ayurveda to video to understand what are vata aggravating foods. If they're eating on the run, remember vata like to move a lot. So if instead of sitting down to eat, they're eating on the run or they're skipping meals, this can lead to an imbalance in vata. When they're exposed excessively to dry, cold, cloudy weather. So think about, wintertime in some cooler locations and cold locations. Oftentimes they'll become imbalanced when they're staying up really late, they're staying awake at night, they're not getting enough sleep at night. So this will further facilitate a vata going out of balance. If their routine is not regular, then vata are much more likely to go out of balance. So vata like to just kind of go with the flow, but it's so important for our vata to have a daily as well as a seasonal routine to help keep that vata in balance. It's like we need banks to the river, or the river goes all over the place and eventually it just depletes. But when we have the banks to the river can flow in the direction that it needs to. And that creative force can flow in the way that it needs to. So oftentimes the use of coffee, caffeine, drugs, or alcohol is going to increase our vata. And then wind. So if you think of air as being a quality of vata, if we increase wind, it's going to increase movement outside as well as internally, physically, and psychologically for our vata. And then the age of life that is associated with vata is typically 60 plus. And so when we get to that age, we're going to have a greater amount of vata in our system. So the ways to balance vata in our system. And just keep in mind that even if vata is not your primary constitution, your vata can go out of balance. And it's the same for pitta and kapha as well. So the way to balance vata is to eat a vata balancing diet. So you want to look at the different tastes that are associated with vata and have less of those, and eat more of the tastes that are associated with pitta and kapha. And you want to eat foods as well that are going to be balancing to our vata. Eat in a peaceful, calm environment, and remember to sit down to eat and don't have a lot of distractions going on, especially when the vata is out of balance. And then engage in wholesome and contemplative activities, things that make you feel good and whole, as well as that make you contemplate life. Remember to follow that regular routine and don't stay up late at night. 10 o'clock is typically a good time for a vata to go to bed. Meditation and yoga are very, very supportive to our vata. And then gentle exercise. So remember, a vata's joints are very, very small. So if you're pounded on the pavement, if you're doing hard physical activity, it's going to further aggravate the vata's body as well as the vata in the body. And then massage is so calming and grounding to balancing our vatas. So these are just different things you can consider to help balance yourself if you notice yourself physically or psychologically out of balance as a vata, or perhaps make a suggestion to a friend. So the appearance of a pitta. The pittas are typically medium size and weight. So the vatas are the smallest, and then typically the pitta are right in the middle. Their joints are going to be more medium. Their body frame is going to be a more medium body frame. So it's not like there's some different diets out there and exercise routines that say everybody should look and eat a certain way. But remember, with Ayurveda, we're simply looking to fit into what we were born with. So we want that medium frame for our pitta. Typically, our pitta will have freckles. They'll have the red curly hair. So if you think about, oftentimes you think about your typical Scots person or an Irish person, that's typically our pitta appearance. Now, oftentimes what will happen with our pitta is that their hair will go gray sooner and their hair will start to recede more quickly in life. The bodies of a pitta are typically warmer. So to the touch, it oftentimes will feel warmer and they feel warmer. Their skin may be a little bit oilier, and again, a fair complexion typically. And if you look into the eyes of a pitta, it's almost like they have this penetrating gaze to them, like they're looking to the very soul of you. While a vata will just going to stare from point to point to point, their eyes are going to move around. So when you have that intense stare, that's typically a pitta stare. So in balance, pitta energy is going to show up as they're going to be understanding people. Their memory is going to be very sharp. They're going to be very intelligent, courageous. They're going to have drive to complete things in life. They'll have an abundance of energy. And typically pitta have our strongest sex drive. Out of balance, pitta will move towards frustration and anger, oftentimes towards hatred, jealousy. Physically, the body will become inflamed and there'll be more judgmental thoughts in the mind. So from a psychological perspective, when a pitta is imbalanced, they're going to be very cheerful people. They're going to have an exhilarating personality to them. They're natural born leaders. So our leaders are typically our pitta, and when they're in balance, they do so in integrity. They have a very sharp intellect, as I had said. They're joyful and they're incredibly courageous. And they have the willpower to excel in life. When pitta is out of balance in the system, then again, these people tend to move more quickly to anger, to judgment, to jealousy, to feeling bitter. They'll have an overbearing, demanding personality, and they'll just keep working without any opportunity to rest and to relax. So that's what happens when the pitta is out of balance. See, pitta can get so much done when they're in balance in a more relaxed way. When they're out of balance, the drive is just like on overdrive and they just keep going like there's no brakes in their system. So from a physical perspective, when a pitta is in balance, they're going to have a good appetite. Their digestion is going to be very good. They'll be able to regulate their heat. So pitta oftentimes will run hot, but they'll be able to regulate when they're in balance. Their thirst is balanced, so they're not overly thirsty like they would be if they were out of balance. Again, their eyesight is going to be better when they're in balance, but it can move to being poor when they're out of balance. Their skin is going to have that beautiful luster to it, and the body is going to be soft and relaxed. So how does a pitta become imbalanced? Again, diet, so incredibly important for all three doshas. So by eating pitta aggravating foods, so the spicy foods, those hot foods, the sour foods. Pitta will increase when a pitta eats when they're angry. So anger is already a sign of increased pitta, but then you add food to it and it's going to further increase the pitta, the fire in the system. Pitta can easily become imbalanced when you are in a hot environment for an extended period of time. Excessive activity and exercise and over-competitiveness, either in your exercise or even in the workplace or in your life. So it's okay to be competitive when you're a pitta, but when it's over-competitive and you're no longer having fun in life, that means you've gone out of balance. Smoking cigarettes can, of course, because of the heat, increase pitta. And then again, overworking can increase pitta. So how do we balance our pitta? Again, diet is so incredibly important. So eating a pitta balancing diet, eating in a peaceful environment, meditating on a daily basis, since pitta are such active workers and doers, and they have so much drive. It's so incredibly important to balance that out with a non-doing practice like meditation. Engaging in calming physical activities in life. So a nice gentle walk in nature. Don't overwork. That's the way to balance pitta. So a healthy work load is fantastic, but overworking is going to lead to pitta being out of balance. And then again, engaging in calming activities like being in nature, and then stargazing, just laying in the yard at night if you have a clear night and there's not a lot of light pollution, and just letting the soft light of the stars come into your eyes, as opposed to the harder light of the sun, which of course is very pitta-inducing as well. So let's move on to our kapha. So our kapha are the largest framed out of the 3 different doshas. And again, we're not trying to get a kapha to look like a vata. We want a kapha to be comfortable in their body. So it's going to be a larger bone, muscle, and body frame in a kapha. They're going to have that thick, beautiful hair, teeth, and nails. Typically, their skin is more oily and it's smoother. Again, they have more water in their body, and so that oil is going to more easily show up. Their complexion is typically paler, and their eyes are just charming. It's like you want to melt into their gaze. They have the larger eyes, and it's that classic beauty that come associated with the kapha. So a kapha energy imbalanced is loving, calm, forgiving, compassionate, steady. They have a good memory. If you think about kapha, you think about the earth, right? They're water and earth, and you think of Mother Earth. So you think of that loving mother energy, imbalanced. Out of balanced, kapha can move towards attachment, greed, possessiveness, as well as different congestive disorders. So from a psychological perspective, kaphas are typically going to be the most affectionate. They're going to be enthusiastic when they're in balance. They're going to easily move towards forgiveness. They're generous, generous people. They have a natural born restraint and patience that comes along with them. Again, if you think about the slow moving earth, there's that patience that comes along with it. They're very, very understanding people. They have a tranquil, relaxed personality, and they're very slow to anger. They're a slower learner. However, once they learn it, their memory retention is very, very good. So when kapha is out of balance from a psychological perspective, again, they're going to move to attachment, laziness, inertia, mental dullness. They're going to feel heavy emotionally as well as negative. They're going to be more possessive, and they're not going to have the ability to let go. They're going to move towards lust, envy, and greed. And typically they'll seek emotional comfort through eating. When kapha is physically balanced, their build is solid and it's powerful. If you think about athletes, our athletes are oftentimes kapha. They have great physical strength and endurance. Their energy is more steady, and they're slow and graceful in action. Their joints are very well lubricated because of that added water in their system. The body is stable. Their immunity is incredibly strong. They're vital human beings. So they show up physically as very strong, and their wounds will heal very, very quickly and easily. When a kapha is out of balance physically, they're going to move to more obesity. They're going to physically feel colder. They'll have more coughing and congestion because kapha shows up more fully in the body, in the upper body. They'll have excessive oilness. They'll have an inability to move. They'll just not want to move or be able to move. A lack of skin tone. They're going to just sleep all the time. They'll sweat more excessively. They're prone to fainting and to itching when there's increased and out of balance kapha in the physical system. So the ways that kapha becomes imbalanced is eating kapha aggravating foods. So it's the same for all three. Overeating, emotional eating, a lack of physical activity. So remember, Ayurveda says take those 100 steps after a meal, but not taking those steps, not getting physical activity, spending too much time indoors, not challenging the mind, and spending excessive time in cool and damp environments. So again, kapha, which is slower moving to begin with, becomes imbalanced when there's inertia, basically. So the way to balance kapha is, again, to eat a kapha balancing diet, avoid overly luxurious, leisurely lifestyle, move, walk, exercise, practice meditation and yoga, breathe, go to bed early, and then wake early. Oftentimes, kapha are going to stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning, but instead go to bed earlier and then wake up earlier in the morning with the sunrise. And then focus on non-attachment in life. Enjoy life, but don't be attached to how it shows up for you. So the way that I like to put this into a picture that makes it incredibly relevant in our relationships is to understand how Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are going to show up in the world so that we can have healthy relationships, even if we're one dosha and our partner is a different dosha, how to understand that and show up in a way that is supportive for each other. And so to give you an example of that, I'm going to give you an example from my own relationship with my husband. So I'm a Pitta Vata and he's a Pitta Kapha. And one thing that I notice as being Vata is that I'm a faster talker, as you can tell. I have a lot of creative ideas, things like that. And so if I bring something to him, an idea, or if I ask him a question, I may say it a little bit quicker and I may expect an answer pretty quickly. But oftentimes I'll ask the question and then there's just a pause and silence and no answer. And no answer, and no answer. Now, because I know that he's Kapha, I can relax with that. I can be patient. I can understand that he's processing at the way that he processes best, and I can just be still and wait for the answer to come. However, before I knew that, I may have thought that he was just ignoring me or he wasn't going to answer me. And so that I might just talk over him and go on to the next subject as a Vata. So understanding how your partners, how the people in your life are going to psychologically show up according to Ayurveda is going to help you better interact with them. Now, also take into account that my husband and I also have Pitta in our system. We both have fire. So let's say one of us becomes aggravated and that fire is increased. Well, then it's going to be helpful for the other one to cool down a little bit and to not further increase that fire in our own system. So if I'm fired up, it's helpful if my husband kind of cools down a little bit and gives me some space. Or if he's fired up, it's good for me to kind of give him space and let him cool down. That way there's less butting heads. A fun joke that I like to tell that my Ayurveda teacher, Dr. Jane, tells kind of gives you an overview of the psychology of Ayurveda. And so the joke is that Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are at the gate in an airport, and all of a sudden the person goes over the loudspeaker and says, your flight is delayed an hour. So the Vata person immediately gets on their phone and they start calling the people that were supposed to pick up, and they call the rental car company and they start worrying about it, and they're doing everything they can to make sure that everybody in the world knows that they're going to be delayed an hour, and that they get anxious about it and they start pacing. And Now the Pitta instead hears this news and they immediately walk up to the gate and they say to the person in charge at the gate, what can I do to make this move along? Because of course Pitta knows how to control things and they know how to get things moving. They're natural born leaders and they want to get this flight going as soon as possible. And then the Kapha just pauses for a moment, stands there, looks around and says, I'm going to go get some ice cream. So you can see that each of the three have different ways of dealing with stressors in life. So that's just a fun joke, just to give us an idea. But you can start to look, understanding your own dosha and the dosha of those that are primary in the people in your life, and understand how you respond to life as well as them, and start interacting with them and with yourself in a more understanding and compassionate way. So thank you so much for taking this time to understand an introduction to the psychology of Ayurveda. Again, my name is Heather Induarina. You can reach me at my email address, as well as find out more information about me and all of my services at my website, healingelementsforyou.com. Thank you so much, and you have a beautiful day. And please subscribe to my channel and learn more about Ayurveda, breathwork, and yoga.